right. I will now call to order the study session meeting of May 1st, 2023. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person city council meetings in council chambers on the lower level of City Hall. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the city's YouTube channel online and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Joanna, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Leidy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Manharamasa will be absent. Councilmember Long.
Here.
Councilmember Jaramillo.
Here.
Councilmember Kondo.
Here.
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. We have 4 items on the agenda tonight. The first one is the Colorado Legal Services Tenant Landlord Legal Services IGA Renewal. City Manager Geyer is here to introduce this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Great to see you this evening and virtually. This evening, we have a presentation that Jessica Holtz, our crew program supervisor, is going to walk you through with an ask to renew the city's commitment to the landlord-tenant legal services program that we signed on to in 2018. We have Melinda Taylor from CLS along with Megan O'Byrne from CLS to help answer any specific questions. One thing I want to note for your benefit on the onset of this presentation is tonight we're really asking for consensus, and then we'll bring back an IGA. One of the things that I discovered through preparing this item is there's going to have to be work done in order to make the amounts right that are in the proposed IGA in your packet. The approach this year with this program was very different than what was done in 2018, where all the cities came together. They all agreed on a certain amount. Those numbers got plugged into the IGA, and then each city approved that IGA. It was done a bit backwards, and so prior to the start of the meeting, I committed to Melinda to help walk her through getting all that cleaned up. In 2018, as in the memo, the City of Westminster took the lead on coordinating all those pieces for CLS, and they did not do that this year because they've had staffing changes. So I'll help with that part. So just know that you're going to see 3 options in a big table. And that's the way CLS approached and really let each city pick. In 2018, it was like, nope, this is the formula, this is the number. So it's a bit different this year. We'll work through that, and then hopefully I'll have an IGA to bring back to you by May 22nd, if not the first part of June. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jessica.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm here tonight to present on the Colorado Legal Services IGA that focus on landlord-tenant legal services. So like Heather said, there's a background to this IGA. In 2018, we signed, the City of Westminster piloted a project for landlord-tenant legal services with the Colorado Legal Services in an IGA. Northglenn signed on to that in 2019, and that was done through a letter of commitment in April. And then now we are looking at no regional coordination for this year like we had in 2018, so that's why it's being brought forth in this manner. When we're looking at the funding for the IGA, we're looking at an increase from $12,000 to $13,630 annually. What this has been able to provide for the City of Northglenn residents in the past has been 80 clinic cases, 67 contacts through the centralized intake system. That intake system is happening at the courthouse, so it's right where people are experiencing their hardship when they sign up for court cases. They have immediate access to Colorado Legal Services and the Colorado Stability Fund. The housing-related cases range between $700 and $1,200 per service, and that includes legal advice, brief services, or full representation. This IGA would be for a 2-year commitment that would take us through 2024. In this table, you can see the range of costs plus cases for each of the municipalities and Adams County. North Glen falls right in the middle. We had 80 cases in those 2 years for the previous IGA, and that puts us right between Broomfield, which only had 13 cases, and the city of Thornton, which had 161. With the financial asks, there are 3 different options that were presented. $20,000 for the option 1, which is based on caseloads per municipality. Option 2 was a commitment on previous contributions plus an increase for program costs over the years. And then option 3 was a rounded off number, which was $13,600. So what does the Colorado Legal Service help with? What does this IGA provide? Provides immediate assistance for people struggling with evictions. So Colorado Legal Services provided 2 different impact studies that I'll take you through. And these are very similar to many of the CREW clients that we have sent forward for this type of assistance. So this first one is a gentleman. And he came to the Adams County Clinic on the day of his actual trial. He needed to file an answer. The individual had not spoken to anyone from CLS yet, so he came prepared to go to the trial by himself. The individual wanted to move, but he just needed more time, and his trial, unfortunately, was an all or nothing. So it was an eviction or not. The Adams County Clinic attorney spoke to that individual about his goals that day. So he walks into Adams County Courthouse, is able to speak to a paralegal or a lawyer that day, and talks about his goals and the collateral damage of an eviction. I don't know how much experience you have with evictions, but if a person has an eviction on their record, it typically means that the next apartment that they go to goes back the previous 7 years. And sometimes having an eviction on your record is a immediate dismissal of you being able, or denial of you being able to move into that apartment. This gentleman was a father, and he was married, and he had 4 children. So a family of 6, and he really did not want to have an eviction on his record. He was able to speak with the attorney, and the attorney was able to negotiate an agreement with opposing counsel that morning. So not only did this individual not have to go to trial, but they were not served an eviction. They were able to work an agreement where he had extra time to move his family out of that apartment, and he did so without having the collateral damage of those financial consequences. So that's a pretty straightforward case. The next case is a little bit more complicated and much more in line with the cases that CREW sees. So this person was living in a supportive housing development. This person had been experiencing homelessness, was able to get housed, and also was living with a disability. When you are living in a supported living environment, there's often more rules and regulations, and this person was violating those rules and regulations by letting someone come in through the window. This was a person that he knew, and it was a woman. He said that she was vital for his disability, and at the same time, she was also his abuser. So this is why the supportive housing was going to be evicting this individual, was because he was violating rules and regulations, not due to finances. So this individual wanted to move, but he also needed a housing voucher to do so. He was awarded a housing choice voucher, which means then he can go into the community and find his own housing. With an eviction on his record, that would be very difficult to do. In order to help him achieve this goal, the Colorado legal staff negotiated a move-out agreement, which provided him extra months of living in the supportive housing with the rules that he was going to pay attention to his rules and regulations. Unfortunately, he was not able to do that, and he continued to let this person into his home. So Colorado Legal Services had to step in again, and they were able to do an accommodations rights and get this gentleman moved up onto the 2nd floor so that window was no longer accessible to the person who was coming into his apartment. Before he was able to move into that second unit floor, Colorado Legal Services had already secured a different place for him to live. And during that time, he was assaulted at a bus stop, which required him to be in the hospital for multiple surgeries, including facial reconstruction. So at this point in time, Colorado Legal Services continued to work with him while he was in the hospital to ensure that his housing was still available when he exited the hospital, and he was able to move into his new apartment upon the release of the hospital. Further after that, the Colorado Legal Services now has social workers on their team, and they were able to get him set up with wraparound services to ensure that he's successful in that new housing scenario in his new apartment. So like Heather said earlier, tonight staff is seeking consensus to continue participating in the Colorado Legal Services Landlord-Tenant Legal Services Program for the years 2023 and 2024. Staff is recommending option 2, which would be a commitment of $13,630, which is an increase of $1,630, and that's per year. If council supports the renewal, staff will bring back a resolution. We'll bring forward the resolution on May 22nd. And I do have Melinda and Megan open for questions from Colorado Legal Services.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that presentation. I guess I'd like to go back to slide 8 where you have the table there. And I wonder, is the $220,000 a target funding number for the next 2 years here? Is that kind of the goal? That's the first part of my question.
Here's
And the second part of my question is, if Northglenn did use 9%, shouldn't it make sense that our contribution be 9% of 220, ergo 20,000?
Hi, thank you for that question. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the support that you have all provided to us since 2018. The table was developed, as Heather was mentioning at the beginning. We had no ability to coordinate amongst all the municipalities. And so in an attempt to continue this valuable program, I wanted to throw options out. Currently, we are the recipients of a lot of federal ARPA funding, which has been able to supplement the additional costs that come with running a clinic. So at this point, I think we were committed to developing and continuing our relationship with you all to continue to provide services for your clients during a time at which we had some of that additional funding. So we wanted to give every municipality their own option or their own choice in choosing an option, which became very, very chaotic. And again, I really want to thank Heather for stepping up and agreeing to help me out. It's been a challenging couple of months, so thank you for that. And I don't believe it would be, yes, we would love to have the $20,000 from you, but would be happy with whatever amount you can contribute each year for 2023 and 2024. At the conclusion of 2024, we'll take a look at our numbers and probably come back with like a permanent recommendation. We'll have a much better idea about what our forecast is for our federal funding. So we're just trying to supplement what we have to keep the clinic going for an additional 2 years. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments for this team?
Mayor?
Councilmember Brown?
Say something?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I definitely do support Northglenn's contribution of $13,630. I am totally in favor of that. I think you guys do a great job and help our residents a lot. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Mayor.
Councilmember Goff?
Sorry, a little behind the times here. I just, maybe you don't know the answer to this, but in our memo, the other, entities, Adams County and other cities, most of them are going with option 1. So do you have any reason why that would be?
Thank you. I don't. I think they all looked at the data early on, and again, it was very varied in terms of how the responses were, but it just turns out that most of them ended up approving that option.
Councilmember Long, how are you doing over there?
Well, I'm confused, which is nothing new for me. I'm doing a comparative here on the statistics for Federal Heights and Northland. I take a look at that and I think, let's see here. They've had 34, we've had 80. They're committing to, looks like 17, and we're holding strong at 13.6. To me, it just doesn't jive. I don't know if that's something that we have subjectively agreed to, or that's all we're allowed to do with our budget, or is there something here that I'm not seeing, Mayor, that maybe you can help me?
City Manager Guyer, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, this is a result of not having this well coordinated. And so that's why I'm stepping forward to help CLS do this moving forward. You know, I think the simple answer is I recommended 13,630 because there are entities that chose option 1 or option 2. And based on, I didn't think option 3, rounding it down in our case, made any sense at all. Certainly if council said, you know, based on the commitment of cases, we're comfortable with $20,000, we can do that. And that would be the corresponding increase. To Melinda's point earlier about CLS receiving ARPA funding, I think if they really needed the 20, they would have said, we need the 20, and that would have been straight across the board. So that's what makes this exercise a little wonky, for lack of a better way to say it, this year versus in 2018. It was the start of a pilot project. We didn't know what kind of utilization we would see. Now we see documented results, but moving forward, we're really going to need to land on a firm number so that way they know what they will potentially be receiving. So if council wanted to do something in between, we could. I picked option 2 because I thought it made most sense for us.
Can I ask one more question?
I have other hands, I'm
Oh.
going to circle back.
And I'll find
Councilmember
my way down
Burns?
there.
Thank you, Mayor. So this pilot program started in 2018. This is going to be funding for 2023 and 2024. What are our trends looking like? Are we seeing, or do we anticipate an increase of cases that you could potentially need more funding for? Are we seeing decreasing? Which I highly doubt. But I'm just
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit tricky because of COVID. The pilot program started pre-COVID in response to a very demonstrative need. And the reality that the folks in Adams County and Broomfield counties, it was difficult for them to travel down to Denver. Yeah. And so we were trying to be innovative and think of a solution to that. And then the pandemic hit. And so we saw, I mean, the variables have been so up and down. I think the latest that we're talking about internally is that we will remain this high over the next 4 to 6 years at least. Would you agree, Megan?
Yeah. I was just going to add that the eviction filings, while they did drop during the pandemic for various reasons, they're now up at pre-pandemic levels. So they're now like the highest levels we've seen in a while. So I expect that we will meet or surpass this at the very least.
Thank you.
Councilmember Brown?
I hope that I phrased this right, because I think it involves you too. Are we more aggressive than the other cities, less aggressive, or is everybody meeting? Because I know with our CRU, I feel like we're very much into the forefront of all of that. I don't think every city has followed our example yet. So that's really what I'm wondering is how proactive are the other cities in working with this agency?
Sure. So the CRU has not been aggressive in recommending people for this because it piggybacked on the ERAP program, which is the
Okay.
Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And then when this IGA's kind of been in flux between the years, we didn't know how much it was still going. And since we have reestablished that it is going with Megan and her team, we are very aggressive in sending people over there. So with other cities not having a crew, Adams County Brighton is hiring. We are the only, and then Westminster has a co-response team, but their co-response team does not couple with their homelessness outreach team. So we are the ones that are the most organized in creating referrals, and then we don't hesitate in reaching out to Megan and her team about direct referrals. So I don't know what our other municipalities around us are doing, or Adams County. I do know North Glen is actively working with Megan and her team.
So their numbers, no offense, could actually be flawed in some way, because I don't see Broomfield, their numbers being, they're either not making it to the clinic, you know what I'm saying? I struggled with Broomfield's number being so low.
So Broomfield has a separate courthouse. And they, so they're not at the courthouse where we are. So we've only recently been staffed enough to send someone to the Broomfield courthouse to meet with tenants there. And they also just have fewer filings since the grant has been in existence, or the IGA. So we're seeing more people, and I suspect most of these numbers come from the past
Yeah.
more recently, so that is why Broomfield's lower.
I mean, my gut is that the numbers are pretty low in some areas, and that comes from underreporting or underusing, right?
Right.
Okay.
Councilmember Jaramillo, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say I support the proof of fully, and CLS, I appreciate all the work you do for people in North Glen and around Adams County that are experiencing evictions. When I first looked at this, I saw that, you look at the reflection of how many cases and how much we contribute, and immediately I thought, $20,000 sounds very reasonable. And when we see the option 2, I mean, I feel like, we have been utilizing a much higher rate than any, municipality around our size, I would say. So, I mean, I'm open to option 1 and 2, but just before I heard the recommendation, I thought 20,000 sounds very reasonable because of 80 cases, $12,000. Like, I didn't do the averages or anything, but I'm pretty sure that's, wow. Like, it seems like, we are getting, I guess, for lack of a better term, bang for our buck. But so that's just my thoughts, coming in before I heard the recommendation from staff. 20,000 sounds very reasonable.
Councilmember Long.
I think as I look at these numbers, my sense of fairness tells me we should be closer to what Commerce City's doing. I mean, they've got 159 total cases, we had 147. They're at 22,000. Your recommendation to us is 20,000. I don't know what other colleagues on the dais share with you, but my sense of things at $20,000 to me seems a fair number.
That seems to be where we are in debate of this topic is option 1 or option 2. I'm hearing some support from option 1, but I'd like to hear from everyone. Councilmember Walker, what are you thinking? You might not be able to hear me. Councilmember Goff?
I was just going to say, I guess maybe that was kind of what I was trying to get at with my first question, is to understand the differences between the different options. And it just sounds like maybe in some ways there's just not enough data to really make a good estimate, because we haven't done it long enough. And I'm along with Councilmember Jaramillo that I think $20,000 doesn't seem like too much. So I'm kind of more inclined to go with option 1.
Thank you. Councilmember Kondo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too am in agreement with the statements by Councilmember Long and would support 20K.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown?
The only thing that, I mean, $20,000 is fine. It's a drop in the bucket, for what we actually have. But as I'm looking over your list, who hasn't approved the amount yet, so we really don't know. Looks like we haven't heard from Brighton. We haven't heard from Commerce City. That's us. And then we have a tentative from Thornton for 20,000. I mean, I'm good with whatever city council wants to spend. We don't have a separate amount budgeted for this, do we, Heather? Or
The
is it all?
$12,000 is included in the legislative budget. So if council wants to proceed with option one, it'll be an increase of $8,000 this year, which we can absorb in the general fund budget.
We'll absorb it in the general fund? Okay. I just want to make sure that we got the accounting side. I'll take that too. Okay. I am fine.
Councilmember Walker, did you want to weigh in?
No, ma'am, not this time.
Okay, thank you. I think we're trying to come to consensus, and it sounds like we're close on option one. Councilmember Burns, how do you feel?
Yeah, we can support 20,000.
20,000? So I think the question to you, Councilmember Walker, is do you support option one?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so it sounds like you have consensus for that tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. Great presentation.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks, Heather.
Take care.
Okay, our second item tonight is the housing policy recommendation. So Sarah Dusenberry, our senior planner, is presenting tonight. Hi, Sarah.
Good evening, everyone. There we go.
Don't do that door.
Okay, now we're good. So I'm going to be discussing the housing policy recommendations tonight and just requesting any feedback and consensus on those recommendations. As a quick overview, just going to go over a bit of background on the project, overview of both of the ordinance updates, and then next steps. So this project has really spurred from the DOLA grant we received in spring of 2022. It was the Innovative Housing Strategies Program grant. Part of that funding went towards completing a housing needs assessment, which we presented and completed in October of last year. And from that assessment, there were 3 targeted recommendations. The first was to develop overlay districts, which we'll go into here in a minute, provide targeted incentives, which included things like upfront costs of infrastructure for developments, but also incentives for homeowners. So looking at things that we can do to help them improve their properties and potentially keep them in the city on a longer-term basis. And then the last one is expanding multifamily options in single-family zones, and that was in response to our lack of middle-density housing. This one is noted in the comprehensive plan as kind of needing further neighborhood-level planning and engagement to really get a sense of how our residents feel about that kind of process and the feasibility in certain areas. So that one's not going to really be discussed at all tonight. The grant overall, and the goal is really to adopt housing policy that furthers affordable housing in the community. So starting with overlay districts, this is really spurred from the fact that we are nearly built out, so overlay districts are a great redevelopment tool. It's also a way of kind of helping with a lack of housing diversity and density as well. So overall, overlay districts allow for an expansion of land uses over what's currently there. So for an example, if a property is zoned commercial auto with the overlay district added on, say mixed use regional is the one they go with, the uses allowed under commercial auto are still there and are a possibility. The mixed use is just added on top as an option. So really, this is an expansion of uses, an expansion of opportunities for our property owners and business owners. One of the big things that it does is it kind of removes that rezoning process as well. So really takes away a step that takes quite a bit of time and money. And with the rezoning process, you lose what that original zoning was. So if you rezone from CA to mixed use, you only fall under the mixed use area. So it's a little bit more restrictive in the kind of uses that you can have. One thing to note, this does not preclude the entitlement process, though they're not necessarily going through a full rezoning process. If an area is an overlay district, the project will be reviewed under our major site plan process. So it will go before the Planning Commission for review, will be reviewed by staff, and will be heard in front of a public hearing. So there is still a public process. It just takes out an extra step, which sometimes can be the difference in making a project viable. The areas that we are looking at potentially doing overlay districts with do align with the comprehensive plan. They align with the areas of focus that are included in there. Those all had land use tool recommendations, and many of them, I believe, were regional, mixed-use regional or mixed-use corridor. The ordinance, as is right now, does not automatically create those overlay districts. It's just providing us the option of utilizing it. So there is still the sub-area planning process that this would be included in. The overall purpose of the overlay districts is first and foremost to really balance the uses, making sure that they are compatible, not necessarily separated, and done all within kind of a pedestrian-friendly environment. Next is providing more flexible development options and standards by that wide variety of uses, but also mitigating any adverse effects. A lot of our commercial properties in the areas that we're looking at are surrounded by residential, so we do want to make sure that any impact or kind of higher impact uses do provide some mitigation so as not to adversely affect adjacent properties. So we want the new development without hurting what's already there. Next one is really looking at it's an investment tool for underutilized areas, expanding the options. This is not only a tool to potentially provide new types of housing, but is also something that can help our commercial centers. Mixed use, in essence, is a combination generally of commercial uses and housing. So it provides new opportunities for some of our commercial centers that could always use more options. And lastly, and as it's kind of mentioned twice almost, and is a really important part, is providing those pedestrian-oriented developments, really making sure that it's a vibrant public place to also be, it's comfortable. There's a focus on the pedestrian over vehicles and cars. We know that they will still always be part of these developments, but putting an emphasis on people walking around, especially when there are potentially people living on site. We want this to be a pedestrian-focused process. One of the things to note too is this aligns heavily with a number of policy recommendations in the land use section of the comprehensive plan that really called for pedestrian-focused commercial developments. One other thing to kind of note, we are looking at adding an affordable housing incentive to this. We're still working with the consultants on it and kind of wanted to get y'all's thoughts on it. But providing an incentive, so if a certain amount of percentage of affordable housing is provided in a development, you get an incentive. Those most commonly are things like permitting fee waivers, expedited review timelines, probably most commonly are density bonuses, so which means you can have more units than what's necessarily allowed as long as a percentage of what's there is affordable. It allows for a good mix of incomes, but also potentially lets a developer offset those costs of the affordable units, which again is also probably doubly important when there are businesses around you that people who are living in the mixed-use development could potentially walk and work but may need something more affordable. I'm happy to go on to the ADU unless there are maybe if we want to do questions on this section before moving on.
Sure. Councilmember Brown?
And you can tell me that you'll answer it at the end, okay? So feel free. I know like when you're going down Irma, all that industrial, that's all NURA, right? It falls under the NURA,
I believe it's, and I may be wrong, but I believe it's just the area along 112 is the kind of NURA area. As far as, or at least the current NURA project is
right,
going
that's where
on.
our
Okay.
current NURA is, but that whole area is considered,
Is it within a TIF?
yes, thank you, my brain was like gone.
No, you're
Yeah, that whole area is, so if you're in an area that is under a TIF, does this just not come into play for those areas, or how is it affected when it's in a TIF area?
To be honest, we haven't looked at that. My initial kind of assumption would be that it wouldn't affect a
Yeah,
TIF
that's what I was
area.
thinking too.
That it would just be kind of, again, that expansion of uses and options. Right now, in that area specifically, we do have the west side of Irma slated as mixed-use corridor.
Right.
The east side we left, since that industrial area is fairly successful and not really wanting to touch it
Good, thank
necessarily.
you.
Yeah. We spoke with Debbie on that one for sure.
Thank you.
But yeah, so my assumption is that no, it wouldn't. We can double check
That's
and do
mine.
some research just to double check, but I don't think that funding mechanism would preclude them from being able to take advantage of the overlay districts.
Okay, if you could just follow up on that for me, I would really
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess I'm just a little curious. A couple of times, and I love the idea about emphasizing pedestrian-oriented design, but like how would you do that? Like can you tell me what that would look like?
Right, so currently, under our mixed-use regional standards in the UDO right now, they do have, it is a more pedestrian-focused kind of a call for development. So it's going to be requirements of more landscaping, things like that. So kind of that focus on the amenities that are provided to pedestrians. Hopefully less parking, not quite. So when we think of maybe something being over-parked, looking at, say, Marketplace and kind of that sea of parking lot, looking at developments that would reduce that. And provide more kind of those outdoor amenities, landscaping, looking at.
Are you going to balance that with like proximity to public transportation, or does that not come in?
So yes, it would definitely be something where access, if there's public transportation nearby, access would be incredibly important, providing that pedestrian access to and from it, making it kind of incorporating as much as possible into the development. With the way public transit is up here and in the region, we don't have a ton of control over where exactly that's going to be. But like say again, Marketplace with the existing stop at 106. If development's going on a mixed-use scale, should take advantage and provide that kind of access and focus. And that's going to be through things, again, I know I've said landscaping, but other things like the design aesthetics of the buildings and the scale and other features that are almost park-like as well. So that's kind of what we're looking at. In terms of more the transit-oriented development, we haven't looked at that immensely within this, but it is something that we could look at and kind of further.
Because you want to rely on that, but I mean, it's, as you said, kind of hard to do that in this part of Denver metro area.
Right.
Right, thank you.
Councilmember Jaramillo?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm familiar with the mixed-use corridor, but I know there's probably a few people on board that are new to this. And I'd like to see a visual where we can see where we can apply what's being presented here. So is it just the mixed-use corridor, kind of like what we outlined before? Is it? or
So it's
all
gonna apply
com-
all three.
Partial?
So we have three mixed-use districts. It's regional, corridor, and then neighborhood.
Okay.
Right now, I believe in the comprehensive plan, we've just recommended either mixed-use, regional, or corridor. Not because neighborhood is not useful, it just wasn't part of the recommendations. In terms of those, kind of seeing and how they get used, we would follow the standards that are in the UDO already. I believe, did that answer fully, or is there another part to that question? I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay.
Let me just jump in. I think to your question, what we're presenting tonight is the concept of this policy.
Okay.
The approach is with the sub-area planning that's identified in the comprehensive plan, we would then look through that exercise, that public process, where this policy might work. So there's not a specific place in mind. If you want to talk about what those areas of focus we've identified, the Marketplace is a very logical location where we would do an analysis of this policy to see if there's areas within that that sub-area plan that this could potentially be a candidate for. And then I'll stop there, so.
Okay, so another part of my question is, when you say neighborhood, you mean residential, correct?
Right, so neighborhood is going to allow for some commercial uses, but it is on a much smaller neighborhood scale. So it's a more limited amount of uses.
Okay.
Think neighborhood kind of services, neighborhood grocery store, coffee shop, things like that. So that's kind of the difference between the three is they all kind of scale up in intensity, with mixed use regional being kind of, as it says, more of a regional draw. It's going to be a little bit more car oriented, a little larger in the types of uses and intensities.
Okay, because I didn't want to like open up the can of worms of like what's going on with Denver, gentrification of all the knocking down brick and mortars and popping up stuff. So.
Gotcha.
All right,
Yep.
thank you.
No problem.
Councilmember Brown, do you have another?
I have one more question for you, maybe 5.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna talk about Irma because of that's all industrial right there. So if we did it as mixed use, could we end up, or would I just have to trust that planning wouldn't allow this, but could we end up with an auto machine shop here and, whatever else, an exhaust person over here, and then someone wanting to build a home in the middle if they were to buy that property?
So generally, the mixed use does have a requirement of a commercial element. It does have a requirement of that mix of uses. So it could be residential, but it would be residential and something, most likely. So yes, to an extent of having some form of housing and then another business. That is just one of the benefits for the sub-area planning is we will look at kind of the various uses that would make sense, and probably look at kind of what is that process, those impacts of having those different uses
Right.
already there.
I like the concept, but I'm very worried, and again with the Senate bill, that we're going to have hodgepodge, you know what I mean? Where I was talking to somebody earlier today about how, do you realize if the Senate bill passes, I can scale my house down to the ground and put in 6 little tiny towns in there and, have my own little city. And that's what scares me about the Senate bill, And it kind of goes over onto this, I understand that we're a small city. I understand that Denver has been doing a lot of progressive things as far as moving up, building up. I'm not so sure that our residents here in the city of Northglenn, actually, the sense that I get from talking to people is they're more interested in leaving their having their suburban lifestyle included. I'm sorry, I'm gonna cough. And this worries me for the obvious reasons that I just stated.
Right.
And I just really hate it when cities go up. I'm here so that I can see those mountains and I can get a breath of fresh air and anything.
Right.
And I remember 4 years ago, Meredith, when we had the house that wanted to become a duplex townhouse. Yeah. So we'll have to do a lot of resident interaction before any of this stuff can take place. Go figure.
Right. One of the components, and I understand those concerns of kind of how things will be put together.
Yeah.
Part of the kind of mitigation in terms of adjacent properties could be things like buffering and landscaping to kind of make sure that that impact is less. One of the other things is that since we're focusing on the areas of focus, there will be sub-area planning that looks at the feasibility of these types of uses, as well as generally there will be a public engagement component to that as well. So we do understand that kind of these changes could definitely have an impact on surrounding areas, and with how small we are and how much residential we have, we understand that it really backs up to pretty much every commercial area.
Yeah.
So as kind of Brooke said, like this is just creating the possibility of the overlay districts. It doesn't immediately create, say, Marketplace is one. So part of that sub-area planning hopefully will get at that kind of that public engagement component.
Okay.
Also, if an overlay district is applied or approved for an area, the developer, if they were to come in and say, I want to do something using the mixed use standards, that's the overlay, it does go before a public hearing. It will be a major site plan approval. So it does have, again, that kind of public component. And staff or planning commission could find that under the criteria, it doesn't meet that. One of the other things in the ordinance as well, there's actually another set of, I think it's like 5 or 6 different criteria where it has to meet some of those to still be considered a good, viable mixed use. So there's actually a couple extra standards that get applied. So we're hoping that kind of through that process, the public is included. It is an option. It does go through our standard processes as well as that sub-area planning process.
I just worry, I mean, I'm all for generational homes. I'm looking at property now. So I'm all for generational living. I love all of that. I just hope that by opening up our doors a little wider, we don't ruin what we already have here. You know, that's just me being cautious. I'm all for affordable housing, but like you know as well as I do, that unless we get a company that actually is going to develop and follow through with their processes for affordable housing, we have no guarantee that a resident who decides that they want a art studio below their house, like that one over where the photography studio is, over by the Circle by Marketplace, right?
Okay, yep.
All right. So I worry about that. You know what I mean? That you're going to have somebody who wants to do an art studio and then build a house on top of that, right? For their living arrangements. It bothers me. I'll go that far. Only because, look at my scenario when I said about my 6 little tiny homes I'm going to have in Brown Village, right? I can set out to tell you that I'm going to do affordable housing, but I can also rent out each and every one of those houses at the market rate. There's nothing that forces me to do it, which we can't do something like that. But that's what worries me, is that we'll have all these people who want to, and with the Senate bill, it's my same concern. Oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. We're gonna split our house into 2, because I literally could on my little lot do really good. But tying people down to affordable housing and agreeing that, you know, they're going to not charge full rent or whatever, income-based, the only way that I've seen that be successful is over at the apartments and things like that, where, you know, a percentage of their apartments are actually affordable housing.
Can I double down on that a little bit? And I don't know, if, Sarah, if you can answer it, or even if Brooke, I think what's happening, and it could be, you know, residents that are watching, it's certainly all of us. And so my number one question is, how does this presentation work or not work with all of the stuff that's happening at the Capitol right now? And I think the timing of this discussion is unfortunate, because if we were able to take this whole presentation out of the context of some significant work being done downtown, it might be clearer to all of us. And so I don't know if there's a way to separate the two of these things, even either literally, like with a slideshow that says, hey, this is the North Glen stuff and this is the state stuff that's disturbing us consistently on the daily basis. So I don't know what you think of that.
Sure, so a couple comments. The concerns about the single-family residential that Councilmember Brown was bringing up is no longer part of Senate Bill 213. That is off the books. This policy has nothing to do with that example whatsoever.
Okay.
So I would suggest that, I'll start out by saying this point. What we are doing is taking a more strategic and thoughtful and intentional approach to addressing housing, not just affordable housing, but housing in a way that is more specifically tailored to this community than what the Senate Bill 213 has. But also mention that the mandates that were in there regarding 40 units per acre within certain areas and proximities to different types of activities and uses have all been taken out of the bill. So the concerns about what's happening with 213 is definitely part of the calculus here, but I would suggest that what we're bringing forward here is this policy concept that has this very engaged public process to it, to seek out where does it make sense to put something like this. Whereas the Senate Bill 213 basically says, I'm going to decide that for you, and this is where it gets to happen, and you're done. We're not taking away any sort of public process other than the rezoning process. What this really is doing is for you to go and look at our sub-areas in this community, and you want to do what's basically, we have an application right now where we have a rezone near the marketplace for senior housing. So they have to rezone, then they have to do minor site plan, or major site plan and likely subdivision. So they have to do all these different steps. What we're suggesting with this policy is that the city would go and say, here's where we think housing would fit in these sub-areas. And we're gonna take that first step out of the equation, which is the rezoning. All the other entitlement process would remain in place. So Senate Bill 213 takes all that away and just basically says it's a use by right and they can just go build it. They would likely have to do site development plan because our codes would require that. But we wouldn't get to dictate where it really fits in the community under 213. Most of those provisions have been, all of those provisions have been taken out as mandates.
Okay, so can I ask a question about timing? Because I do think this conversation is going to get really muddy with 213, because you're talking about the as of now conversation of how it stands in this moment. But we know that it's already changing from how it changed on Thursday to where it's headed in the House and what the governor still intends. So my worry is that all of that, which it's a big ball of politely stuff, right? It's just a mess that's causing a lot of anxiety. We are doing the right thing. This does make sense, but it's not going to actually make sense because the conversations are happening at the same time. So my question to you is, what is the timing required for this? So I'm looking at, we skip to the end and we go, okay, we need to spend money by September. But is there a space to press pause on this conversation until that stuff gets handled?
So they have to make a decision by the end of this week on the bill.
Right.
And at the end of our slides, we have a process where we can bring this policy forward, as we have it prescribed in there, which I believe is,
June
June 12th, thanks. So the point is like, there's plenty of time between when we might bring this back to you and what the fallout or resolution of 213 is. I think for our purposes, I think what our goal and objective here tonight is let's have this conversation because we think this is a smarter way to go. And more importantly is if council is comfortable with this and how we've set this up, we can get it teed up to go whenever it needs to go. And if 213 throws us a wrench in it, we can come back and revisit that. The other option is we can just stop the conversation right now and come back again. I would say that from my perspective, what we're doing is, as you said, the right thing. So I don't know that I would necessarily slow this train down because of 213. In fact, this could maybe be the more better template for what 213 should strive for. But that's, yet again, when I provided my testimony, down at the House or at the Senate hearing, I basically told them, I says, this is not implementable.
Are you going tomorrow?
What's that?
Can you go tomorrow?
Well, the bill that was the first version.
I know.
The current version, I think from my perspective, is that it's the sleeves out of our vest. I don't see the same concerns that I had with the original version. It is a drastically different bill where there are no mandates in it in terms of where prescribed zoning and everything else is. The only thing that they have attempted to address is other communities have discriminatory policies regarding the definition of family. Ours does not. That one aspect is the one thing where there's a gray area that we can easily clean up depending upon the final outcome of that provision. But the majority of the rest of the provisions of what was prescribed and how it potentially impacts us as a city, most of those have been taken out of the equation.
Okay. I don't want to jump into a legislative question, but I would disagree that we're good how it is right now. So I guess what I'm wondering, and obviously I want council to weigh in, but I feel like this information really does need to either be listed out in columns, like this is all we're doing, this is all it is, because it doesn't read as simple as you're presenting, which I hear what you're saying. I'm just worried about the public, and I'm worried about us having a really clear understanding about what this is. Like, I'm definitely not ready to vote on it. So if the conversation is just, hey, how do you feel about it? We're going to bring it back to you in June. Okay.
That's what we're doing.
I mean, I have concerns about how it's written and the fact that it's convoluted in comparison to, because I'm very worried still about what's coming downtown. And so it makes it hard to say, to look at this in a bubble. Does that make sense? I'm having a hard time looking at this in a bubble.
Mayor,
So-
can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Based on what I've heard so far, there's a couple other pieces that we have planned to bring back to you. On May 15th, Proposition 123. So why don't we do this? Why don't we get through this week? What council has the ability tonight to give me consensus to table the item. Table the item, and then I'll work with Brooke and Corey, and then we'll somehow try to make sense of whatever happens with Senate Bill 213 this week, or maybe we don't know, right? And then we'll try to figure out, try to somehow package it to where you see all three pieces, if you'd like that. Probably early June. If we can make it happen sooner, we'll try. So then the consensus I would need tonight is just to go ahead and table this item, and then we'll bring back all three pieces. This piece, Proposition 123, and then Senate Bill 213 and the impacts.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
How does council feel about that?
And that's just on the overlay district, or is it this whole?
I think it's the whole thing.
Okay.
I agree with you, Mayor, that maybe it's me, but I can hear the same words coming from you. I'm getting them all, and great idea. We've talked about it before, but I think we are once again being incredibly progressive in a world that isn't moving as fast as us. So I would prefer to table it and bring it back and have the three conversations together. Otherwise, you're more likely to see me say no.
How does everyone else feel?
I agree with the tabling and looking at this in the future. I'm just going to put two things out there that come into my head. First of all, the Department of Local Affairs looks like they instigated all of this, put the money out there to have us look at it, hire a consultant and take a peek. Right now, I have a great distrust for the Department of Local Affairs, seeing how they're acting in the legislature. Number two, we have two Petri dishes right now that we can look at and see how they're going to be working through. First of all, we got Carl's Farm. We're going to see how that all impacts all of us, law enforcement included, safety, pedestrian walkways, the berms they're building, all that we're hoping to see, and the infrastructure that hopefully will accommodate a tremendous new influx of folks. And then I'm going to add a little caveat that we're going to see very soon coming to us from the Planning Commission, and that is a new 5-story, 370-unit that will replace the Global Academy location. And that's going to raise a lot of concern as we're dealing with it now when we're talking about Huron and Community Drive and everybody that's concerned with that. So I'm just saying, we've got a couple Petri dishes we might want to evaluate as we go forward with vis-a-vis these parameters and this concept that you're sharing with us. So those are my observations.
I think those are excellent points. Thank you. Councilmember Kondo, how do you feel about it?
Yes, ma'am, I would also be in favor of tabling as suggested.
Thank you. Councilmember Walker?
I would support tabling it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time. Please
You did a
know we
great
value
job.
you. This is not, this was good. This is not about you guys.
Not personal.
Thank you.
Just business.
Yeah.
I watched that this
Just
week.
life happening around us. All right, third item, introduction to emergency preparedness Police Commander Ron Osgood is here. We don't get to see enough of you, Commander. Thanks for coming in.
I feel like we should
Thank
applaud.
you for having me today, and hopefully we don't make it so you don't want to see me again.
Oh, come on, we look forward to it. Hi, how are you?
Oh, so hit the
Very well,
right-
thank you. Good to see you.
This is Captain Riley with the fire department. He is an awesome resource. I work very well with the fire department, and he's definitely an expert in this. And then, of course, everyone knows Tracy Bull, who this couldn't have happened without her work. It's been outstanding, and I want to thank her a lot for helping me a lot with this.
They just smile and present your work.
I'm sorry, I'm not real familiar with it.
Click the right arrow. Click it again. Click it again.
Oh, because we weren't done.
Just keep clicking it until you see your,
Okay, thank you.
again, again. There you go.
Okay. So again, thank you again for having me here, and hopefully that we can answer any of the questions that come up and go over a brief overview of getting where we're at and where we need to go for emergency management. I'm going to just kind of read some of this stuff. Overall, I'm not going to bore everyone with reading all the slides, but this one kind of goes through the whole process, emergency operations plans, the status, the update, what we're going to kind of look at, EOP framework review, emergency operations plan again. Excuse me if I keep referring to EOP instead of emergency operations plan, but whatever works for everyone else, just so that we don't get confused of what I'm talking about. We'll identify the council roles and different things as we go forward with planning and training and things like that. And then we'll go here. So I'm going to do just a quick overview of our current emergency operating plan. Was originally adopted in 2015. We had an outside emergency manager consultant come in and write that for us. Just so you know, we have done some updates since then with at least contact lists and things like that. So it has been updated somewhat, but we're definitely in regular to update state and national what everyone's doing. So it's important that we look at this and keep moving. This review includes a basic framework of emergency preparedness, planning, and council roles. Main council role is to provide leadership and policy guidance before, during, and after a disaster or a critical incident. And please let me know if I need to slow down to go through the slides and whatever the pace works best for everyone. I'm a little out of practice.
That's okay, thanks.
Okay. As you can see, I'll go over a brief history of NIMS, National Incident Management System, and ICS, which is a component of NIMS, which is the Incident Command System. NIMS has come about over decades of work to improve management and interoperability of responses to critical incidents, which are disasters, whether man-made or natural or things like that. A lot of it started in response to fires in California in the 1970s. After doing some reviews, they found that a lot of the command structure and resources and tracking and bringing of different resources could have been a lot more efficient. There was things that were, different things that were not put in place that caused those resources not to deploy efficiently, which caused some people to be doing the same work. Also, wrong type of equipment was sent to do certain types of jobs and tasks like that. Another incident, September 11th attacks, really started, the whole country started thinking we need to start looking at how we can be better about responding to these types of things to save lives, prioritize that, and again, property damage and things like that, so that when we do respond to these, we can minimize all those things. And other part of it is the preparedness, which we'll discuss a little bit later, of how we can prevent them when we can also. A big thing about NIMS and the ICS component of it is it is very flexible and adaptable to different types of incidents, sizes, and as they expand. I mean, it could be as simple as just putting together a plan of how we're going to manage our 4th of July event to a very huge critical incident like, say, a tornado, or an earthquake, or wildland fires like we experienced in the Marshall fires. one of the big components of emergency management is the Emergency Operations Center. And there's some quick points here, and I'll read a little bit into it just to give a little better idea what the Emergency Operations Center is. It's an off-site location from which leaders of an organization can coordinate information, resources to support incident management activities, basically your first responders and other type incidents that are happening. The tactical on-scene part of an incident isn't actually generally at the EOC, it's at the incident command post where that's separate. That's where the way I like to refer to it is like boots on the ground. Your boots on the ground are more of your tactical, and that would be like your incident command post. There are some exceptions to that, like say, and I'll deal with that a little bit later, like a large snowstorm or a huge blizzard or something that takes days and stuff, and there's not a specific place to where like an incident command post would be. And that's where the incident command, the EOC would actually take over that operation, like we had days of snow removal, getting equipment in to recover people that had like health issues or getting food or water, or to evacuate what we may need to do. Obviously, here's a picture of our police department. Our current Emergency Operations Center is our training room. For those of you who've been to our training room, our Emergency Operations Center, we did stand that up, a partial stand-up during COVID, where it was mostly kind of an information sharing type situation where we were getting post update from Adams County and Tri-County Health at the time of the updates and what the situation was looking like. So that's about the only time we really did stand that up. It's basically, we use WebEOC, which is a computer base, which it helps us if we need certain resources from other jurisdictions or through Adams County. That's how we would order and track and how those resources came in, and depending on the type of what resources we needed. We use, right now we have laptops to set up for the WebEOC. That way, if we had to move, if some reason we had to move that structure to another location like M&O or wherever, based on the type of incident, like say something happened to the training room there at the police department, so we can move it. And something that Captain Raleigh pointed out and that we're starting to see now, is some of these are being set up virtually. So there's not an actual physical location sometimes, depending on the incident and the scene, and they're doing a lot. He was reported with the fire department now is doing a lot of that, and so are a lot of other places. And what's one of the advantages he pointed out to me today was that you can get more people in for the input and decision-making and things like that may not be able to physically respond for whatever reason to the actual Emergency Operations Center. So there's a lot of advantages we can look at and maybe update later for the Emergency Operations Center to look at that to make it more virtually accessible and things like that. So I think that's really important. Those of you who've seen our training room, we have TV monitors and other things so we can put out different things to monitor the different aspects of our responses. And even sometimes it's even good to have even local news on, because sometimes they get information that we're not even aware of through our normal communication channels that give us, updates on certain type of events, something we may need to address or things like that, to try to keep the best information coming in so we know the best way to respond to each and every aspect of the incident. Here's a quick organizational chart for the EOC manager and the different staffing of the EOC. And you can see where it's split between the command staff and general operations. And then you have basically, when we start to do some further down the line, you have different staffing. It's between command staff and general staff, and they have different functions. As you can see, we have like the public information officers and safety officers. They're more for like the event as it's ongoing, more of the response cycle, and then your different sections, your planning, logistics, and things like that for not only what's going on right at the moment, but further down the route, like financing. How's this going to get paid for? What's already in place? What options are we going to do for this that would affect budget and things like that? So I think it's important, and you can see some of the staffing, and they're all part of the city's staff, department heads and things like that. And succession planning is all included in these pieces when you go further down the line. Did I not click the right?
I have to take that off your
Here we
resume.
go. Okay. So And here's some of the organizational chart and some of the roles. We'll discuss some of the roles of the elected officials, of your roles in the EOC. During the response phase, the city council best serves the city by allowing the people that are your first responders that are trained and have the subject matter expert in those areas to deal with those situations as they're occurring at that time, and to make sure that they put the people in place that are best for that. Their main role for city council is the planning and training before a disaster and the leadership of and during the recovery of a disaster. That way, like reaching out to the community, to show that, they calm them down and what our response is, and that we have things as best under control we can, and that we're working to help all the different situations, whatever people may need to recover or return to some form of normalcy after a situation where an incident occurs. One of the things that you'll see, it's kind of the overall, is they're basically the policy group. It's where you'll start looking at, like we're going over today, what the policies are, what our budget's going to be, how this is going to work. Do we have everything in place that we need to have? That over urgency versus the boots on the ground, the things that are happening during the actual emergency itself, what happens before or after. And we'll go into some more slides that'll go into a little bit more of that here in a second. And here, just like I was somewhat touching on just a minute ago, these are the 5 phases of emergency management phases. And the next couple slides, we'll kind of go over a brief synopsis of it, and I'll add a little bit to it with the presentation. So prevention focuses on preventing hazards from occurring, whether naturally caused or by humans. And not all hazards are preventable, but the loss of life and injury can be limited with good plans, like evacuation plans, mitigation plans, and things like that. What you'll see now is when we go to mitigation, you'll find that mitigation and prevention kind of overlap somewhat. And if you look at some places, if you look at some things online, some of the training, some places talk about only 4 phases instead of the 5, so they kind of overlap a little bit. Mitigation is the effort to reduce the risk to life and property by lessening the impact of disasters once they occur. They include things like building codes, zoning requirements, creating a defensible places around homes, kind of like, making sure shrubs and trees and stuff for wildfires like we've dealt with the Marshall fires are taken care of. So even though we do have a fire, we try to lessen the impact of that disaster emergency and several other types of incidents that we can, if we can't stop them from happening, we can at least lessen the impact they have on life and property when they do occur. Training, planning, practical exercises, they are the cornerstones of preparedness. They focus on the readiness to respond to all types of disasters and emergencies. So the better we train, the more we commit to those type of things, so when they happen, we're ready to just respond quickly and efficiently as possible. Response is the reaction to the incident to save lives, alleviate suffering, or reduce economic loss. Response actions may include evacuations, emergency rescue and medical care, firefighting, search and rescue, several other, like the first responder types of actions that you would take in a critical incident, emergency, or some type of a disaster. Recovery are activities that occur beyond the emergency period to restore critical community functions, bring back a degree of normalcy to the community, and recovery in things like debris cleanup, financial assistance, all types of things like that to try to bring people to get them back to some type of normalcy and to help them with that, to recover from that incident. And they can be long-occurring depending on the type of incident. It could be short-term, it could last over years. Look at the Marshall Fire is a perfect example of that, how that's still going on, and they're trying to work with all those things. So those are some examples of the recovery phase, and that could be, from days, months to years. Incident-specific annexes offer means of extending functional annexes to address specific and unique types of emergencies. So these are part of the plan, and they cover specific things that might need a different type of response, different type of equipment, different type of training because of their specific nature of that incident. Things like notification, protective actions, emergency, other needs generated by a particular hazard. They would allow the jurisdiction and its EOP to address priorities identified through the hazard analysis to try to think of these things before they exist, how we're going to respond in the best way to take them in and to deal with them. And they also help meet the regulatory requirements associated with some hazards, like hazardous material spills and things like that. There are other certain things that are required to do that. Some hazards may require that appendix be prepared for various functional annexes other than may affect for one or two functions. They could overlap several different functions, and they're just depending on the need and the size, the scope, and what the incident occurs.
And then each of these has a plan underneath it?
Yes.
Thank you.
And they're basically, there are certain things that, even though they may overlap, there are some that are going to be completely different than, say, a blizzard versus a wildfire versus a tornado versus, things like that. And as you can see, some of those are, and obviously after COVID was something different to all of us, something that a lot of things that we didn't, those biohazard type situations that were new.
This cybersecurity one that threw me.
Yeah, so we're seeing that a little bit now with the hacking of some government web bases and things like that, the cloud, things like that. It's becoming more and more of an issue. Someone like me, that's a little bit of the previous generations that's new, but we're starting to see that more and more. We've even had some notifications for other law enforcement agencies that had some of their databases hacked. So that's definitely something that we'll probably have to look more and delve more into in the future, as how to address those things and what happens and how, if certain data is breached, how we address it.
Right. Thank you.
Now we're to go over emergency support functions. And emergency support functions are the grouping of governmental and private sector capabilities into an organizational structure to provide support, resources, program implementation, and services that are most likely needed to save lives, protect property and the environment, and restore essential services and critical infrastructure. They also help victims and communities return to that normalcy and all those type of incidents like we previously just, bring people back to a normalcy in a place that they're used to and comfort and things like that, depending on the type of situation that it is. And you can see some of the listed on there, some of the things that would be included in that. So the next couple slides, we'll talk about what emergency support, they basically answer the need, who and what we need and how it's going to work. And here's some examples of that. Do we need to evacuate? How will we if we evacuate, how are we going to move people from one location to another? What resources whether it be RTD, we've worked with School District 12 to have access to their buses and some other things we've done like that, have some of those discussions. And then not only then once we evacuate them, where do they go? So these are all things that these emergency support functions start addressing. Not only that, other additional rescue efforts needed, how medical care, how would that be provided? And then when we move people, how are we going to track so when people start looking, identify family members, friends and family and things like that, how we can start putting people back in touch with that. And we've dealt with that a little bit with some school incidents and things like that at a much smaller scale, but this is for, much larger scale. So all those things we have in place of how we're going to accomplish all those tasks and what support function is going to be responsible for making sure that gets done. what's really important about this is we answer these questions before we have to respond to emergency instead of while we're responding. Because if we start asking these questions, or how are we going to do this, how are we going to do that, who are we going to contact, that's time. In a critical incident, in an emergency situation, that could be lives. So the more we have these things in place, the quicker we can respond, the more efficiently we can respond to save lives and protect property. And again, this goes back to, this is all the things that's so important for council, is the planning and the training to make sure that the city and our partners, and I guarantee you the fire department is, because they're fantastic, are all doing these things, and all these things are in place prior to any of these things happening. And that goes back to, we refer to it as the policy group. And then here's just a follow-up a little bit more of what we were talking about, some of the different functions that we look at when those different types of emergencies come up. Anything, like we said, from the cyber to a fire to, tornado. Luckily, we're at the right side, I-25, like we were on the right side of that. It's not as big a threat as if you're out on the eastern plains, but it's still good. Years ago, Thornton had one touchdown in Thornton, not far from us.
Didn't we have one on 120th over the bridge, like years and years and years?
Ma'am, I never, years ago, I was asked to do a presentation on whether we needed tornado sirens in the city. And I reached out to Brighton, Commerce City, several things like that, and I did some research. And based on all the history, that's the closest one I could find. Obviously, there may be mistaken, but that's the only one I could find at that time. Was it just at that old shopping center on the southeast side of 104th, just off I-25 in Thornton, and I can't remember the exact date of that, but it was quite a while ago. Touchdown in a couple areas there, so.
I live very near there. That's interesting to know.
Yes, it was quite a while ago, ma'am, and,
Okay.
Yeah, quite.
and it wasn't super, it was a very small touchdown. I know before I became a police officer, the one that happened in Denver, the south, I was actually coming back from work, I was doing landscaping at the time, and we watched them. We got caught on Santa Fe, and you could see the touching down, and we're like, some of the guys I was working with, get us out of here. Like, where do you want me to go? We are stuck in, we're going nowhere. So, yeah, I remember when that happened. That was, back in the 80s. And I think that was even prior to that.
I was in third grade at Cherry Drive Elementary, under my desk.
Yeah, that was, and luckily, that, it was bad enough, but we don't, the Eastern Plains, they get some pretty good ones. Luckily, a couple blocks were, but, it was quite a while. So, again, we'll go under some of the council roles and responsibilities, briefly over the slide. And we have a municipal statute, and I'll basically go over this real briefly. Municipal Code 4-2-3, the city manager is responsible for the overall preparedness of all persons and agencies involved in the city's response to emergencies and may activate portions of the EOP for training to evaluate the readiness and of the city's resources. And there's also some things in, some other city ordinances and statutes that cover some of the responsibilities. And you can see through some of that. City charter has a couple things in there too about purchasing, emergency purchasing powers of mayor and council and things like that. Okay, emergency management training. Here's some, I'll put out a few things that we are currently doing, and please, I'm going to give this mostly from the police department's perspective, but Public Works, all the other fire, they all have pieces in place, and just, I'll go over a few things. The ICS training, the 100 and 700 that we require for our employees, it really helps to kind of get a basic overview of some of the things we're talking about, both the National Incident Management System and how incident command works, how if we respond, who's in charge, all those types of things, how many people you have so that and then who you respond to, report to, and things like that. We do, the police department, and I know other departments, Public Works and others, also look at how we respond to critical incidents, things like whether it's evacuations, crowd control, traffic enforcement, things like that. We also take CPR, first aid classes for for that response, do those life-saving things that we do when we do get there. And some of the overall city training that you may not think of it, but also could touch on some of those things, like some of our training on workplace violence. You know, you talk about whether the run, hide, and fight training and some of that. The more people, even in the city itself, whether staff or the community, the more people that help take care of themselves. For those who don't have that opportunity to, it allows us first responders to focus more on smaller groups of people than larger, if some people have had that training, so they know how to properly address that when those things come, so we can better address those that have no choice or in a position that they can't take care of themselves. And it helps free up some of our resources. Things like emergency kits and things like that, things to help for the community to take care of. And even things like diversity training and things like that. So let's say we have to evacuate, and to get people for that emotional stability, there's certain things that are important to, you know, whether it's food and the type of sheltering and those types of things, or people with special needs like wheelchairs. So that training helps us to understand, you know, we need to have a little bit of different, we're not just gonna throw everyone, if we do an evacuation, may or may not throw everyone in the same place. We look at things, because we also have to worry about people's emotional and mental health also when we respond to those types of things. One of the things I'm doing is I've started, spend a little bit of time now, but now I've moved back into getting acclimatized back to emergency management. They have weekly meetings, the emergency managers in Adams County. I've been attending those. I haven't attended all of them, but I've attended several of them. So we start, you know, we talk to other emergency managers from the other cities, Brighton, Commerce City, Adams County, just to name a couple. And then they bring up different things that are going on, different things that they're looking at, recovery plans and things like that. So I'm starting to get acclimatized to that, to get into back to have that group, so we know who we can count on and who's going to be there and what capabilities they have when we do have to respond, and we know if, you know, if there's something missing or who we have to reach out to. And Adams County is fantastic, the fire department's fantastic. We have, even on like a daily basis, with Thornton, Westminster Police Departments, even when we've had recent incidents, they immediately come, send officers to help us assist with whether crowd control, traffic control, and things like that. So, you know, we do that, those small emergencies almost on a daily basis, and we start building those partnerships. So when it becomes a much larger scale, we know where we can get that immediate help and then who to reach to as the scale grows for the type of emergency it is. And then here's a little bit more of what we were just talking about. And then again, like I mentioned here, something I forgot to mention, we work with Adams 12 schools quite a bit. We do their lockdown drills, lockout drills and things like that, do a lot of training with the schools to make sure they're prepared and have things like that. And then some of the children to get used to seeing officers in the building. I just went to one last month, and a lot of the kids were coming up and giving us high fives and saying, thanks, Popo, and things like that. So it's really important. And not only that, it helps the officers know if we have to respond to something. We know where the buildings are, the rooms are, we know, you know, and get real familiar with our buildings and schools so that we can get in and out of them quickly and wherever we need to do, whether it's evacuation or, you know, first aid or whatever we need to do. Code Red, this is something that's come up recently in a recent incident, so we're working on that. Recently, I've contacted AdCom and got some of their information to get people to sign up for that. Our community relations officers have been going out to the managers for our apartment complexes and stuff like that to start handing this out, to really get people to really try to start signing up for this, not only when they're getting new people in, but so constantly remind people, hey, this is something that can become very important. It's good to have this signed up so that when these things happen, whether it's a shelter in place or whatever, or an evacuation, that they have the most up-to-date information we can get really quick. And I got the list through AdCom of what, you know, how their policies and procedures work for that. And working on our web pages. It's also, if you go to county's emergency management webpage. All this stuff is listed on there. So that's definitely a public information thing we can put out to really, again, going back to that, the more people that can help take care of that self, that frees up more responders and our resources to help everyone else. And this is a very good way to do that, and it's very important. I know a lot of these, when we've had these situations come up, some people are going to get missed for whatever reason, so if we just keep pushing that out there to get more and more people signed up for it, so we can make, so we can really get this, a lot more people prepared for when these things, so we can deal with that part of it. Okay. For the next steps, we'll start looking at, we're going to, as you can see, the timelines here, start putting this out so that you can look at our new emergency operations plan draft and look at everything and see if that fits in with everything. We went with Adams counties. We looked at a lot of other ones. Tracy's done an outstanding amount of work on this to make sure it's in compliant with county, state, and federal recommendations. We're going to have fire departments looking over it now to make sure if there's any concerns or stuff we have, we'll look at it. So that's our next step, to get that to council so that you can adopt a more updated and better plan from our previous plan, so that we're better prepared to take care of these emergencies or these disasters should they occur, and that the city and our community can be confident that we will be able to handle this in a very good manner and respond appropriately should anything occur. And then some of the other things, we're setting up tabletop exercises and then partnerships with mutual aid, like the fire department, Adams County Office of the emergency manager for Adams County, and we've known each other for years. He was on Brimfield Police Department on the SWAT team when I was on the SWAT team here. So I have a very good relationship with Adams County Office of Emergency Management. And if we have a situation to where it's beyond our scope, what our city can handle, they're our next step for help. And that's Adams County. Then of course, after the county, then it becomes a state, then federal. And then obviously, mutual aid agreements for help, things like that with other police departments, other types of, equipment or resources we need, depending on what types of emergencies and things we're looking at. Another thing, and we could, just a quick, if you'd like, I don't know if we could get a copy of the draft if you want, or if you want to wait to a later time, and we can discuss a few points, but that's definitely something we can do in the future, whatever. It's totally up to you if you want to. We have a copy here if you want to look at it real quick, or if it's something that we could, when you get, we're going to present this coming up a little bit later, if you want to wait till that time to ask the questions and go through it, but that's totally what you think is best at this time.
Well, I think we have a few questions for this part.
Absolutely.
So I will go to the raised hands, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Okay.
Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Commander Osgood, thank you for that very informative presentation. Some of you know I actually lived and breathed NIMS for about 5 years when I was in San Diego running reactor accidents drills for Navy nuclear powered ships. So this is all very near and dear to me. I have 3 questions and 2 requests. I would like to go back to slides 12 and 13, and I just want to reconcile, for clarity in my head, who comprises the command staff. We have, I believe, the city manager, deputy city manager, chief, and deputy chief. Is that?
I'm sorry, sir, I lost my numbers thing here. Let me try to find them for you. I apologize. So 12 and 13?
Yes, it's the org chart wiring diagram.
It's these two.
The org charts.
After the EOC locations, and then there's an
EOC
EOC organizational chart.
Let me find mine. I apologize.
Slides, page 12.
Okay,
and
yes, sir.
13.
I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
I just want to make sure I have clarity in my mind that the command staff are the people in the blue square there that you have on slide or page 13.
Yes, sir. The public information officer, the safety officer, and the liaison officer. I'm sorry.
Okay, so is that in addition to the 4 people that are listed there in the blue box? The
Oh, I'm
city
sorry.
manager, deputy city manager?
Let me go back one more. Oh, no, that's not it. Oh, I'm
That's
sorry.
what I'm just trying to get some clarity to figure out who is in charge. If we have an accident,
Yes,
is
sir.
it Heather Dyer who is going to be leading the command staff and next to her is going to be chief or?
Okay, so like the EOC would be the EOC manager. Now, remember, that's the offsite. Now, actually on scene, you'd have your incident commander. And then they would report. And then obviously, depending on the situation, at what point the EOC is stood up, because some incidents are going to happen very quickly, and they may be over except for the recovery phase of the EOC. This is the communication list here, sir. I apologize again. So these are basically your liaison that will inform city council of wherever we're at, different policies or procedures that are being followed, what the response looks like, what resources have been deployed, and basically, you know, kind of the status of the situation, like, you know, people injured, things like that, or, you know, transports if we have to evacuate, just kind of like to update you on what's going on and where we're at and what the next steps are.
Okay. I may have to have a follow-up with
Let me
you.
follow up on that question. So what you're seeing in the blue box, primary is always going to be your city manager. What happens if she can't respond? Who's going to talk to council next? So you're looking at a succession tree there. So first you're going to talk to the city manager, then the deputy, the chief of police, the deputy chief of police. That way you guys always know who's next in authority to speak.
Now, are they going to be in the EOC as the leader?
Yes, so when you get your book, there's a section called the base plan, and in that base plan, it lays out succession planning for every department. So Kent Kesselman for Public Works, he can't respond, he delegates 2 other people that can step up, take over, and keep running. And that's what this
Okay,
is.
understand.
Real basic.
And you got 4 people there, so hopefully, my second question is you have depth to be able to support 24/7 operations should this become a long-term sort of.
Yes, sir. And that, to expand on what you just said, I apologize again. This is not only the succession, but redundancy also, and like you said, operational periods. Because if it's an ongoing, you know, several-day event, obviously, if you had your whole staff there at the whole time, and then they have to get sleep, then who you have. So you may not, you know, depending on the situation, you know, after the city manager, the deputy city manager may come on the next operational period or things like that.
Okay, got it. And then my third question, and ask you to forward to page 18 where you have the goals. I mean, that's nice, but what are our principles as a city? And have we reduced that into writing, and is it very clear? for the command?
I'm sorry, sir, which?
Page 18.
18?
Yep, emergency support functions. Have we distilled into writing what the principles are for our emergency response, i.e., is it in writing and have we all come to agreement? Yes. First and foremost, it's safety of lives.
Yes, sir.
And it's safety of property. It would be really nice to know that it is codified somewhere. And perhaps maybe it is in the emergency response plan, and that's something that I will need to review.
And like you said, sir, with your history of NIMS and ICS and emergency management, saving of lives is always the top priority. And even in police work, in fire work, public works, even like with, any type of event, even water treatment, to make sure that people have drinkable water. But obviously, priority is obviously saving of lives, then we move down from there. And even though some of those things overlap, because at some point, even the property and environmental can eventually, even over long-term, affect lives.
So I have two requests for consideration by council. And that is, my first request is when we do the tabletop, I would recommend that perhaps maybe council attend as observers. And you'll get to learn a lot as to how the organization deals with these complex issues where you got various subject matter experts and liaisons. I would make that request for consideration by the Davis. And then in particular, I don't know if you've decided what you're going to tabletop, but certainly what is of interest to me is active shooter and wildfire. And I would welcome council to express what their interests are in seeing a tabletop exercise. My second request is, obviously, if we are going to be the talking heads and the communicators to the residents, I would strongly recommend that perhaps part of the training curriculum includes how to give a press conference, how to be able to interact and talk with the media. And, having your public affairs officer, or in this case, Diana Wilson, be able to marshal and manage people, because clearly media folks can be ruthless and relentless. And to a certain extent, whoever is the spokesperson, whether it's the mayor or mayor pro tem, just kind of going through the mechanics of getting the mayor in and out of the room and having somebody else take questions, going through those sort of activities, I think will help. And it shouldn't just be the mayor pro tem. I think it's great for any council member to know all the finesse points for talking to the media. Again, I would ask that the days consider that as perhaps potential training opportunities for the council. Thank you. Great presentation.
Councilmember Combo, I'm going to respond to that in a way that I know that Diana has responded in the past. So page 21, it does not have individual council members speaking, and there is a reason for that and a purpose behind that, so that we have a streamline of communication and that we're not opening that up to every single council member. That could actually do the city harm. So I know that question has come up before, and I know that was her response in the past, and you dropped off. So hopefully you heard that answer. Councilmember Long.
I've been listening to the presentation, and having been through some emergencies myself, both foreign and domestic, in hospitals, I can tell you that having sat on the board of the North Metro Fire Rescue District during the Marshall Fire, I felt powerless. Maybe Ross can talk to some of it too, because I may not have it all right, but I want to share with you how important it is for all of us to know and realize what's at stake when these things take place, especially when it goes over multi-jurisdictions. Now, the Marshall Fire was like a 200-year incident or whatever. I mean, you won't see that again, hopefully in our lifetime. But I can share with you, when we emptied out all our fire stations, everybody was gone, all hands on deck. It was chaos. 2 hospitals that had to be evacuated. Our PIO stepped up with multi-jurisdictions, controlling and working with communications, because it was chaos. And she worked 4 days, 24 hours without sleep every day. And she gathered everybody that was a resource that would listen and pay attention. She went to a whiteboard and laid it all out as to what needs to take place. In the meantime, all our people, we had different heroes showing up at different instances. What I'm sharing with you is, you're making recommendations, Councilman Kondo, on what we ought to do. There's a part of me that says, if we could do it, possibly have a lessons learned presentation by those that were involved in that Marshall Fire, to have a firsthand understanding as to what we were faced with and what people did. And the unsung heroes that we'll never hear about because they're so modest and they don't want to come forward. But I can share with you, as a board member, I felt powerless. And when they called us all together, what they said is, we need emergency funds. And this is like on December 30th. We're talking New Year's Day here to make a decision. We did, without hesitation. And our folks were still out there. Like I say, all hands on deck, every engine was out there. We lost hoses, we're lucky we didn't lose folks. And we were just part of the small part of the whole workforce that was out there. But I can tell you that the lessons learned storyline is just now come out from the state of Colorado, from what I understand. Now, some folks did their lessons learned better than others, in my opinion. But you can't do this enough to share what you're sharing right now, to know every single piece of this. And with those that are in charge, and I think that Councilman Kondo's asking the right question, Who's going to be the incident commander? Who will take charge? Where's that center of command? Especially if you're multi-jurisdictional across Adams County and countless other towns that might be involved. Now, I'm talking about a catastrophic. I'm not talking about a focus that might happen in North Glen or maybe a Westminster, Thornton, North Glen, whatever. But these things do happen, and you have to be prepared and you have to have your wits about you. But there has to be that command authority that speaks and understands and hands off to the communications folks. Because what happened with that fire was nobody knew how to talk to anybody else. And media was calling in. People were calling with their loved ones. Where are they? People were being evacuated. Is my house going to burn or is it not? I mean, again, this is an exceptional situation. And again, I'll harken back to it. I was on the board. I was involved, but I felt powerless. And it's not a feeling you want to have. You want to know that there's somebody in charge. What happened with us was, very fortunately, we had a bunch of heroes that stood up, took responsibility, and I'm still, I get emotional when I think about how they stood up and protected so many people. Evacuating 2 hospitals. Our doctors that we just recruited, boom, they were there, helping do the triage, what was important. And then fighting the fire to keep the hospital from burning itself. My goodness. And who's going to take fuel to the engines that were running out of gas on the incident? After 5 or 6 hours on scene, they're running out of gas. So who's going to take the fuel out to the fire engines? I could go on, but I'll just wanted to give you a sense of it. So when you're on council and this comes to you and we're involved, we got to know what's going to be taking place. So again, I'll share with you, as Councilman Kondo has made recommendations, I would recommend that somehow, some way, we have a presentation to show the pieces of what took place during the Marshall Fire, which is extraordinary, no question. And that's a worst-case scenario in my mind. But even so, just to share what everybody's role was, how people stepped forward, I think that's really, really important. And again, I can't support what you're doing enough. I'm wholeheartedly in support of what you're doing here and your efforts. So, excuse me for waxing eloquent here, but I just want to share some of the emotion, some of the feelings that we had, and I can still see the faces of my fellow board members. There's 5 of us on the North Metro Fire Rescue District Board, and we all looked at each other, and our faces were like, we couldn't really do enough to support the folks that were in, and they were still in the field, still at risk. And I know Ross Riley has got some thoughts on this too, if you wanted to share.
Just real quick to agree with you, sir. The chief and I responded to Columbine.
Yeah.
So I have a little bit of understanding of that. We also sent our Lieutenant Lauk and officers to the Marshall Fire, and it was in like, I don't want to cast aspersions, but he had to take over some roles that weren't put in place there. And that's why incident command, like you said, who's going to take charge? That's why incident command is so important. And there are, when you look at some of that training that we're going to recommend that council looks at, talks about, experience, who, not only just official rank like myself, like a commander, but who has the most experience in that type of situation and the most subject matter expert. So there are things in incident command that looks at, like, just like you said, how that person who is going to be in charge, at least at the incident command, and let alone the EOC, is chosen. So did you want to? Sure.
Well, just really quickly too, because I want to make sure, time has passed, and I want to make sure everyone knows that Chief Ramos did come and give us quite a summary, an update, lessons learned for sure, celebration of everything that took place. We had a full presentation by him on council. CML has also hosted quite a few of those lessons learned. The mayor of Superior has spoken multiple times in multiple settings to do what you're talking about. I am looking forward to the recommendations for training because I can see the appendix, the emergency preparedness, local elected and appointed officials guide, I think is important for us all to read. And there's also a specific FEMA training that I'm guessing you're recommending. So that's a training I have to take annually in my other role. And so it does outline all of these things. And I just wanted to make sure that you knew that some of those conversations had taken place.
I was aware of Chief Ramos giving a presentation. I'm just saying that there's so much beyond,
Oh, absolutely.
with all due respect and without disparagement, with respect, there were a lot of things that could have been done a bit better.
Even the best can get better.
Yes, and in multiple arenas, those conversations have been pretty raw and filled with emotions as well. Yes, what do you have for us?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Councilmember Long, you make a lot of good points. The only way we learn in emergency management, obviously, is to look at what's happened, because we can't predict what is going to happen. So we do very detailed reviews, and Marshall Fire was very, very challenging for me. You brought up a great point that I go out to the fire stations and sit down with the people who were out there fighting the fire, and they don't want to talk about it. It was just, yeah, we showed up for work, and then we were out there and we did some stuff, and then we did some stuff and more stuff, and we ate some pizza and had a bottle of water, and but I do want to acknowledge Ron and Tracy for this phenomenal plan that they have put together so far. There's a couple little things that we'll do some edits on to make sure that you get a good copy. But for the tabletop exercise, we could pick any scenario, throw it against the wall. It just has to be big enough and bad enough that everybody gets to play. And your comment about feeling powerless, I know exactly what you mean. I opened our Department Operations Center, which is a smaller version of an emergency operations center, about 1 o'clock, and I was there until about 3 or 4 in the morning, trying to support our folks that were still out there in the field. And as members of the policy group, at some point, an incident commander or the EOC manager will make that call to you and say, we need X, Y, Z, AA, BB, and really that's, that's the role of the policy group. So, yeah, if the training that we can provide ahead of time so that you know that, so that you don't have Councilmember Long's frustration of, I'm sure you wanted to pick up a shovel and go out and beat down some flames. So it's a great point. Hopefully Ron and Tracy and Chief May will let me jump in and help design the tabletop, and we'll find something that, like Councilmember Condo's suggestion, a big bad scenario that will tax all of us for a while. Otherwise, you should be very proud of what your team here is doing.
Always.
And we're very happy to be a part of it. Ron and I have been chasing each other around emergency management since, we had dark hair back then. And so it's good to have Ron back and re-engaged in it. At my level, for North Metro Fire, much like any emergency management organization, we just work to make sure that we are always able to respond, which means whatever emergency operation plan that I come up with has to dovetail with the city of North Glen, Adams County, the state, the feds. And so it's really an honor to be part of it and asked to contribute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. So Commander, did you want to move into the next part, the NIMS overview for senior officials? Or is that just an attachment for us?
That's an attachment, ma'am.
Okay.
So you guys have a recommended video that's there from FEMA. It's about 7 minutes long. It does just gently touch on city council rule. Ours are going to be a little bit more specific to what your guys' roles are. It's very general. there's a guide in there as well. It's got clickable website links for council recommended training. You pop on there, we try to let you know how long the training is, so you know what to expect. You can also go ahead and load the materials first and glance through it before you walk through the training. Out of the 4 recommended, 3 of them do have a test at the end. I'm sorry, I'm telling you in advance, there
You
is
get
a
your
test at the
certificate.
end.
Yeah.
And if you get on the FEMA's website and you want to know anything specific, there are 14 pages of different training classes that you can take. So if you have specific questions about wildfires, about what the CIO does, there's training for that, and it's available. On May 19th, you guys will be getting your EOP books. It comes in 2 forms. You're going to have paper and you're going to have digital. Digital is your friend, it's links. So as we're approaching a situation, and I say, hey, we might be coming up on needing to evacuate, you guys can brush up on what evacuation is, what the city's going to do, what's recommended by the state. It's all there. One thing to know about your copy is the numbering. So we have to mirror Adams County, the state of Colorado, as well as FEMA. So you'll see in our EOP, we'll jump number 1 to number 3. I'm sorry, Pueblo's stockpile of chemicals does not apply to us.
Okay.
But if a statewide emergency call says, please respond, our numbers have to respond. They can't say, hey, respond to 3, and we show up ready with our fire trucks, and we don't need that. So we have to keep the numbering and the names consistent.
We'll forgive you on that one.
So it's boring. And then on, one piece we didn't address in here is the public outreach that's council driven. Through Heather, we're having our first EOP for our residents on May 23rd at the open house for Public Works. That's from 4 to 6 over at the M&O building. He's partnered with Adams County. They're coming out with presentations, financial. What do you need to have in your home?
All that good stuff.
That preparedness we talked about, so that the more citizens that can help themselves during emergency allows us to free up resources to help others. And Kyle Lopez from the Adams County Office of Emergency Management is going to come out and.
And that's, you said May 24th?
May 23rd is Tuesday, 4 to 6. We'll be here May 23rd to tell you all about it. That's when we're going to do our proclamation for Public Works Week.
Oh.
But that's going to be our first sound out to our community to see how they respond. What do they want to know more about? What more can we do as a city? And then Ron will be able to, when you guys have other open houses or city block events, we know what we want to request, they can roll out again, and we can get our community involved.
Cool.
It takes more than us making decisions, people have to make the decisions themselves too.
And where is that meeting on the 23rd?
It's at the M&O building over on Claude.
Yeah. My backyard. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Brown, did you have any other questions?
I just wanted to thank all 3 of you for putting this together and really giving us the support. I know that we've watched other communities go through it, and just knowing that you guys you have our backs, my back, our backs, I just really appreciate it. You mean a lot to, and our residents.
Councilmember Long?
I just have a quick question. AdCom is fairly new, is it not?
It depends what you mean by new. sir.
Well, the AdCom, what I'm familiar with is the one that we've put in place through the North Metro Fire Rescue District, the communications 911 calling system.
Right, it was prior to my joining the police department 31 years ago.
Are you talking about the CAD to CAD project?
CAD to CAD, that's what I meant to
You're
say.
talking about TriTech.
I'm so sorry,
Yes, sir,
CAD
that's
to
a-
CAD.
Yes, sir, that's a new, basically software product that's fairly new, but that's actually a bunch of trainings come up with that shortly too, because that's going to be upgraded here in the next month or 2. They're starting to upgrade some of that, at least on the police end. I'm not so sure about.
Is North Glen part of the CAD to CAD?
Yes, the CAD to CAD project, Chief Ramos, this was his dream a long, long time ago. In the north area, we have Adams County Communications, the city of Thornton has a 911 center, Westminster has a 911 center, Broomfield has a 911 center, and Federal Heights has their own 911 center. On the fire side, and I think it's the same on the police side, we all run together.
Yes.
Who, if Station 14 knows that their 6.5 inches closer to that call than Station 71, then they'll go. But we knew, so that was an organic thing that we just always did. So Chief Ramos had this vision a long time ago that there had to be a way that we could tie all of these communication centers together, which happened last September. So now a dispatcher at ATCOM can see every resource of all of those 5 or 4 other agencies that I mentioned. They can see them up on a board. And so if a call drops someplace, regardless of whose city it is or whose jurisdiction, if one of my engines is closer to a call in Brighton, then we go and we figure out all of this stuff on the tail end. We've seen areas following the implementation of this CAD to CAD where response times have gone from 10 minutes plus to now 4 to 6 minutes. And the time savings comes in because it used to be a call would happen in North Glen, Adams County would, and we didn't have an engine that was in service, they were all out on calls. Adams County might call Thornton. Hi Bob, how's it going over there today? And it would be 4 or 5 minutes before Thornton got an engine going. So we've cut all of that out and it's more of an instantaneous thing. It's become like one big 911 dispatching system. So, yeah, it was a great question.
Thanks for the clarification.
It is a little bit different for police. Obviously jurisdictionally, laws and stuff are a little bit different. But that said, we constantly get back up, even if we don't request, because they're monitoring the shooting we had the Friday before, 2 Fridays before last. Both Thornton and Westminster PD responded with officers to help assist us with that. So it's slightly different, but we do help each other constantly. Unfortunately, a couple years ago, when Thornton had their incident at the Walmart, we had officers down there almost immediately, or assisting them almost immediately. So we back each other up a lot here in the North Metro area in Adams County. Not quite as fine a system as the CAD to CAD as the fire has, but we monitor each other's traffic so that we know that's a big incident. If we got some officers available, we'll get them over there. And we try to return the favors as often as we can too. But Thornton and Westminster specifically, including, they've been very good at backing us up when we have those little bit larger incidents.
I've seen that,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, and I know you do the same for them.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just wanted to call attention because this particular packet item has 97 pages. So if you go to page 94, it took me, I found it and then I lost it and I found it again. So page 94 has the training course recommendations. And when you go to 95, those links are live. And so that's where you can find the web-based course and the classroom materials. And there's a couple of them there for you. So I know this is a passionate area for quite a few of our council members, and so they might want to dig in a little deeper. Or if they already know it, the rest of us can dig in a little deeper. But I just wanted to highlight that because sometimes on those large packet items, we miss the stuff at the end. So thank you so much for all of that information, for this huge just wealth of knowledge that you have shared with us and for the work that you do. I mean, this is a big
Tracy
deal.
for doing the lion's share of work on this and then putting up with me for being a little rusty on these things. I haven't done them a lot lately, so I am a little rusty. So thanks for being a little patient with me on that.
Commander, it was lovely to see you. Come back and visit soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will get this up to date.
Thanks, Tracy,
Thank you.
for being the superstar you are.
I do the research, they do the practice. It's a shared experience.
I think I would like your side.
All right, the next item is the City Council Quarterly Agenda Planning. City Manager Heather Geyer will present this item to council.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this evening is to do, I think this is the second check in with council in terms of agenda planning. As many of you know, my role as city manager is to set the agenda. It's a collaborative process with council. And so tonight is an opportunity for council to review the tentative future agendas and provide me with any feedback. In the slides ahead of us, I'll talk you through some specific highlights for your benefit. I'm not going to read you all of that. The most important piece here is that we're talking about tentative future agendas through September 25th. So the next time I'm in front of you on July 31st, we will talk through the end of the year, which is hard to believe. We're at that time and place.
Flying by.
It is flying by. Okay, so in terms of upcoming meetings, you'll see on the left-hand side the 2023 cancellations through the end of the year for Christmas Day. I went ahead and added Christmas Day on there. For planning purposes, you can have that on the horizon. And then in the next iteration, I'll add January dates to that as well, capture New Year's Day, and then Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, and so forth. Per council direction, we did add a July 31st study session, which you can see already has items on it. That's a fifth Monday. Typically, we do not have council meet on fifth Mondays, but it's at council's discretion if you'd like to, which is why that was added. As a result of canceling 3 upcoming meetings, 2 in June, and then the July 3rd meeting as a result of being right before the July 4th holiday. So exciting news. It's budget 2024 time. I think more exciting than most topics. So these dates are programmed into the tentative future agendas in front of you. So please look starting in August, September. Budget 2024 will culminate with the adoption of the budget on October 23rd. So if you do not want to miss a budget-related meeting, please make note of those items. The other exciting piece that got added to the tentative future agendas but didn't make the PowerPoint slide because I already had it done before I went to this meeting last Thursday is at our OAC meetings for the new City Hall project, we decided to go ahead and add new City Hall project updates monthly starting in late July. So similar to the Rec Center, similar to the Justice Center, we'll be coming to you monthly with updates. You'll see the same type of detail that you've seen previously for those of you that served on council through both of those capital construction projects where we outline change orders and provide pertinent information. So we plan to break ground on that project June 5th and believe late July will be a good way to capture the work underway there. So with that, are there any questions about what we have scheduled? I mean, based on tonight's meeting, you know that I'll already be making changes to May 15th with Proposition 123 based on consensus to package the result of SB 23-213, as well as the housing needs overlay district conversation from tonight. So I'll rework that. Any feedback on anything on the back of the tentative future agendas? Joanna's put this in a very organized fashion.
Yes, it is
So
nice,
hopefully it's
yeah.
easier to follow. We've really done well in terms of making our way through the list of items. So I think I recently shared with the mayor that I believe we're at a good pace right now in getting through items. We did have RTD Partnership Projects Program scheduled, and we bumped that off, and we're waiting for some conversations on a regional level to happen before we put that back on for your consideration. And then the Civic Center parking item that you know is forthcoming. I'll have a better feel after next week, better idea of when that gets scheduled, hopefully in June sometime in terms of next steps. But I'll stop
Can I
there.
note a couple of things? So taking the recommendation from Councilmember Brown, I am recommending that we do that proclamation for fentanyl next week. And so that would be added, but it's not on here. And
You, Mayor.
yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to highlight, because it'll help us stay on track, is that we have already put the placeholders in there for the city manager's evaluation. And
Yeah, that's what I was just looking for. Where is it?
yeah, so it starts July 24th.
Okay.
And then we finish up July 31st. So it's just, we've tended to get very, very busy, and then we end up off calendar and off schedule, and so it's nice to see it on there, and we'll stick to it. It will not get bumped.
But if we do, we'll give you 6 to 8 weeks notice after the fact. We're gonna do
Councilmember
better this
Kondo.
year.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So it's the very end, it has quarterly update from Judge Bale Hatch. I think we're now trimesterly, isn't that correct?
You do.
3 times a year?
Yeah.
It says 3 times a year?
Yes.
Now it should be municipal judge trimester.
Is there anything that anyone has questions or comments or concerns about? Is this a good
I
time
got
to ask?
tired just reading it.
I know, right? It's very productive. Can I ask who's going to CML? All of us, maybe? Maybe?
My due date is
Oh,
questionable.
questionable, okay. Okay,
know
wow,
Nick's
it might be all of us. Maybe we can get, will Corey organize a dinner for us?
No, but I will.
Okay.
Yeah. Would council like a dinner?
Can it be in the lazy river?
Oh, there you go. If we can get it scheduled, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
pretty busy
I
with
can-
the other
I can
events.
get Susan on that tomorrow, see what we can come up with.
Look at the schedule. What is, yeah, is it the Gaylord? Yeah. Yeah,
Did we register?
I think
Are
so.
you registered, Councilmember Burns? I'll have Susan reach out to you.
I mean, I saw almost everyone's hand. Councilmember Kondo, did you have another question?
Yes, I did. I'm curious under TBD.
Oh, we can't hear you. Speak up.
Curious, under TBD, you have Maker Housing Update. I wonder if Heather can comment on that exactly. What is that all about?
This is an item that I placed under to be determined from a proactive sense of having Peter Lafari with Maker Housing come in and talk about what the work of Maker Housing. I had met with Peter last year, I believe last spring. This just has not risen to the level of being a priority that it has been scheduled. So it would be an opportunity, in particular for newer council members, to learn about Maker Housing, what they do, why they do it, and then projects. Peter and I keep in touch pretty regularly. We have not had any opportunity to partner on any projects, but we do stay in contact should an opportunity arise. So this would be informational in nature.
Can I make a hopeful request that Kent will arrive in the traffic cone costume next week?
A hopeful, or do you want to just make a directive?
We could vote.
It is his choice, but it does bring us joy.
Jason, can you arrange that?
Don't tell HR that we're requiring him to wear it.
Yes, I'm not, that is not an official request from council. That is a hopeful suggestion.
We will,
Yes,
I'll see what I
I'm
can do.
manifesting it.
Yeah.
It's a lovely thing. It brings us all so much joy.
The Coney costume is pretty fun.
Unless Jason wants to wear it this time.
That would be awesome. He is the new deputy city manager.
Oh.
Oh, man.
Now I'm gonna buy him a hat. Okay. I'm just kind of skimming
Sure.
it, making
Yeah,
sure
no,
everyone
take your
remembers
time.
our strategic planning session on the 13th.
I would like to do something without my fellow council people on my anniversary, but I guess I gotta wait till then. We bumped the food truck carnival down one. And I'm like, I told Joe the other night, 8 years, we've not, probably even longer, been able to go out actually on our anniversary.
I
But
know.
my plans will happen after this strategic.
Oh.
I'm strategically planning it.
Yeah, I like that. Councilmember Kondo?
Yes, ma'am, I will have to excuse myself on the team building as that same weekend, Dr. Cog has their strategic plan. So as soon as the daytime event is over, I will promptly move on.
Okay. Thanks for letting us know. I'm trying to figure out when is the food truck carnival?
The weekend after
Oh,
the
goodness, they
13th.
moved it. They got it away from
Yeah.
Mother's Day?
Yeah. it is the way it
Yeah.
is.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay. May is the busiest.
It is. It's the beginning of the busiest.
Yes, it is.
Right.
Okay.
It's our event season.
Any other questions or comments for Heather on this item? Nope, great.
Not
Thank
at
you so
this time.
much.
Okay,
Very,
thank
very
you.
helpful. And hearing none, we are adjourned. Hope everyone has a safe travel home and we'll see you next time.
Night.